Hello there, and welcome once again to Rebuilding the Collection, or Jazz Labours Loved and Lost in Lockdown. I'm Paul Palmer. I hope you're rested after our short respite, although I've been rooting around in my drawers again. Careful, it's not what you think. I found that my stock of old jazz albums on cassette tape is very much still with us, although it is now a little bit depleted. So there is still work to do on deciding which of these remaining plastic briquettes to either bin or keep. And very much hoping he's still with us and not depleted in any way is the man joining us again from down the line in Houston, Texas, Mr. Eric Blachman, friend and former colleague. Hi, Eric. How are you doing?
Very good today, Paul. And you're in fine form yourself.
Well, that's great. Thanks very much for that. I always appreciate a compliment. A reminder that we're discussing my cassette collection by album title in alphabetical order, which allows us to discuss different albums from the same artist in different episodes. I think we got as far as F's in the last video, so we have got some G's and H's for you this time. So here is the list. Starting with G's, we have John Coltrane, Giant Steps, that was released on Atlantic in 1960. Yusef Lateef, The Golden Flute, that is one from Impulse, and that came out in 1967. We then proceed to Eric Dolphy, These Are the H's. The album was entitled Here and There, and that came out on Prestige in 1966. Then there's Freddie Hubbard, Here to Stay. That, funnily enough, was recorded in 1962, but wasn't released on Blue Note until 1976. And finally, there's Anthony Davis, James Newton, and that is Hidden Voices, and that's came out on the India Navigation label in 1979. So there's a list for you. Any observations at all, Eric? What do you think?
Fantastic list. It's only the Anthony Davis that I'm not too familiar with at all. The Coltrane, I dip in and out of getting perhaps over familiar with it as an instrumentalist because it's such an authoritative, commanding, spectacular display of tenor saxophone playing.
So let's start off with the John Coltrane, Giant Steps. What can we say about this album? What a fantastic album.
Can I do a brief moment of show and tell with my original Giant Steps album, vinyl album, and my alternate takes Coltrane album, which is not in this jacket because it's on my turntable. This came out, if I quickly can locate the date, 1974. This alternate takes album was released. Coltrane died in 67. And I find, as with Sonny Rollins, I have a couple of albums of alternate takes of Sonny Rollins albums. And as a saxophone player, I'm fascinated with the alternate takes because when I used to go to gigs in New York, all you had to do was go to someone's next gig, and you literally were hearing an alternate take. If they were running for a week at the Vanguard or the Blue Note Jazz Club, and if you went down 3 or 4 nights in a row, you were listening to alternate takes. The Coltrane made such an impact when it came out. It beyond dazzled. It was, the rest of jazz's recorded history had few standouts prior to this. Kind of Blue was a standout in 1959. And so then along comes Giant Steps, And I don't know about the rest of the world, but the saxophone world flipped out, you know?
Mm. And I think the recording for Giant Steps was only separated from that of kind of Blue by a matter of weeks, and
That's right.
it's amazing that this pioneer of sound on that the one album comes to create this overwhelming, powerful statement on his own account just a few weeks later, isn't it?
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I think my teacher, Eddie Daniels, who as a young man asked to sit in with Coltrane, he had sat in with Sonny Rollins. Coltrane, by Eddie's account, was gracious and said, well, we're working on new material, so otherwise you would be able to sit in. And I remember that remark. Coltrane, by all accounts, was very intense, very focused, and clearly had a lot perpetually going on in his head, and seemed to have a huge appetite for practicing, collaborating. And he and McCoy Tyner, in my mind, are very fertile ground, unlike anyone else around them, for innovating. I mean, the pianists still speak of McCoy Tyner and Herbie Hancock as being on top of the mountain, jazz pianist post World War II, with a little bit of to the side, Chick Corea and Keith Jarrett, for example, also being very influential. But it's really all coming from Herbie Hancock and McCoy Tyner, stuff during this time period. So in any event,
Although Tommy Flanagan played most of the tracks on this.
right. There's Tommy Flanagan, and that gets talked about a lot because it seems that Flanagan bows out early with soloing over the changes after Coltrane gets done. And then there was all kinds of talk amongst musicians, perhaps not the listening public, as to what was going on there. And I think Tommy Flanagan steps forward in some interviews at some point after and acknowledges, yeah, wow, he got toasted by the changes, and you know.
Yes, I think that may be a time to actually talk about what actually the content of the album is, and why this is such a phenomenally difficult, I should say, album to come to terms with from a technical point of view of any musician, really, and why it's actually become so influential and people aspire to playing like this. So, what would you say? What would you say about that?
Well, I agree. There's a video I've watched of Frank Tiberi and Joe Lovano in front of Woody Herman's band soloing over Giant Steps. And this is a video that's for all of us to witness and hear on YouTube. And it just strikes me, whether it's those two or anyone, since Coltrane did this, of people to my ear, I'm hoping that they spend a lot of time coming up with formulaic, practiced approaches to it, because I have trouble fathoming that a mere mortal can be spontaneous and hear the changes and play the changes with such command and such authority, with it all sounding like it belongs and dovetails together. By all accounts, Coltrane was in his basement for half a year or more, working out, so-called working out these changes. And as you say, during the time period of Kind of Blue, these guys had huge appetites. I mean, Coltrane's participating in Kind of Blue while simultaneously working on his own projects. And to call Giant Steps a project is to put it in the wrong perspective. Giant Steps is a courageous leap forward of sorts in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, and the way that you and I were speaking off camera previously about the musical analysis, you know, I like the way you put it all. I think you should.
I'll do that in a minute, but what? Why? I mean, just to inject a slight note of perhaps contradiction or controversy, shall we say? Why is he actually soloing like this? Why? If you listen to it, it's highly patterned soloing, which seems at times to be a little bit repetitive in choruses, particularly over maybe giant steps, and a criticism I've heard. Well, I haven't heard it. I've just thought it might be levelled at him. It's slightly mechanical, and
I agree. It sounds like all of those things. To me, the tune, it occurs to me now. By the way, audience, in Texas, in the United States, and I'm in marching band country. And here, a marching band is very katan, as marches are, and the half note gets the beat. And it strikes me that giant steps, the half note gets the beat. Boo, 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 da. And for Coltrane to take the vertical approach of running arpeggios in various inversions, this is obviously the part he worked out, so that with his arpeggiation vertically, he can do an elegant kind of voice leading that is both vertical and horizontally melodic simultaneously, but in a way entirely different than what Lester Young was teaching us about. But Lester Young, to the best of my experience or knowledge, didn't play stuff this fast.
No, very much not. Yeah, so I suppose a riposte, if you like, to the argument about the mechanical playing is perhaps that that he's actually chosen or worked on a very kind of detailed and restrictive form of chord change, the sequence. Coltrane changes based on sort of diatonic harmony, then put substitutions in the way of micromodulations to the major third, away from the tonal center. So you end up with defining an augmented triad, which sounds has a very destabilizing effect on tonal harmony, and it sort of subverts the hierarchy of chord structures, and it means you can play a lot more freely, but it also means you cannot really determine exactly where you are within a given key. And so he was then limited to defining elements of each particular chord, which he then strung together in a very, try to make it as coherent, and probably needed, I would say, probably more than the 3 months he was locked away doing this for. But he does break out of that, doesn't he, with these shrieks and these kind of very powerful, emotional sort of cries with his saxophone.
Two other things I want to speak to, because giant steps still mystifies me. I'm reminded of the comment someone once made about playing with Thelonious Monk. To play with Thelonious Monk was it was a little bit akin to, you're waiting for an elevator, the elevator doors open. You step in only to notice after the fact that the elevator wasn't there. So this disorienting sense of thinking, okay, you're going to play over giant steps changes, and you start doing so, and it's totally unsettling. There's nothing to hang on to. There's, like you say, a shifting tonal center. The sand is shifting under your feet. And the title, Giant Steps, it seems to me is suggesting this was a giant step for a jazz musician to negotiate in the art of playing the changes. This is not In the Mood. This is not Autumn Leaves. This is a departure.
Yes. And Countdown, which is one of his numbers on this. I think it's the last track. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It is simply the chords of Tune Up, which is a Miles Davis tune, or is tributed to Miles Davis. Somebody else had made a claim for it. Can't remember who it was. Anyway, and he's applied his major third micromodulation technique to this.
Yes.
And so you can't recognize it as that tune at all. Not at all.
Yes.
And but it has to be said also that there aren't just these fast and furious numbers. There's some beautiful other tracks. For me, the ballad Naima, a very beautiful piece. He's named a lot of these tracks after people he knows, his loved ones as well. So yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. We have to hang on to this one. And as I see, you've got the actual real McCoy there. How often do you play that?
Oh, this album is well worn. This is from my high school days.
Mm.
And it's just very well worn, but still plays.
Do you still try and work through those changes, or?
Well, every once in a while, my wife tells me I need a heavy dose of humility every once in a while, or perhaps more often than that. And it certainly humbles me to attempt to, with the Jamie Ebersol, for example, play-alongs or what have you, or a YouTube track, backing track, to try to play giant steps.
One thing's certain, I think we have to have this album. There's no way we can be without. And I think we've only got time really to discuss one more contribution, and that's the Other G album, which is by the player Yusef Lateef. He's multi-instrumentalist. He plays saxophone, flute. On here, he's heard on oboe as well, actually. So the amount of instruments he plays is I think he also played some kind of Japanese style flute or Eastern flute, not exactly the shakuhachi, but maybe other types of instruments of that nature. So yeah, but also a pretty rock solid jazzer, really, capable and comfortable with swing and with straight ahead jazz. What do you make of Yusef Lateef?
I love Yusef Lateef. I mean, I first heard him on a Cannonball Adderley album. I guess Cannonball had him as the third horn along with his brother Nat. And fantastic. I mean, I love their repertoire. I love the fact that Yusef Lateef was not what I was always expecting of a tenor player with alto, trumpet, and tenor. For example, he wasn't inside. He wasn't. Seemed to feel no obligation to be a loyalist with the tradition.
No, there's a lot of sort of bucking conventional music. I mean, who has okay, I know there are oboe jazz oboists, but I can't name many. In fact, I can't really name any other. If somebody reminded me of one, I'd say, "Oh yeah, that I do remember." But off the top of my head, I can't think of one.
No, nor can I. Nor can I. I think of there's a swing Illinois Jaquette playing jazz bassoon, but I can't think of anyone playing oboe.
So anyway, what sort of tracks have we got here? We've got on the track Oasis, he plays flute. That's a nice mellow number. And it's the track which is called exactly like you that he plays oboe on. and it is just a standard swing number, isn't it? And it just sounds great.
I think Yusef Lateef is akin to Miles Davis for me, and so many others, where if you see his name on an album, unless the album isn't going for an awful lot of money, I'm going to buy it. Yusef Lateef is got stupendous integrity as a jazz musician.
Yes, he's described as always being an original on the album, on the website All Music.
Yeah.
And certainly for that reason, I'm going to keep this album. And there's some good playing on all of the tracks. Really, there's nothing really I would leave out. Okay, well, we spent a long time on Giant Steps, and deservedly so, I think. But also we've turned our attention to Yusef Lateef. So I think that's really a show. So now I have to address the issue that we haven't really been very good at finding albums, from the modern era, whose names begin with letters that we've already covered. A right through to today's show, H. So I think we ought to be addressing that, because we're not very modern. We are a bit stuck in our ways, aren't we? So yeah, but I guess once you start doing that and you start looking at more modern stuff, you're looking at the fragmentation of jazz as you know it, and you loved it. At the time when you really loved it. But should that preclude us from looking to see whether we can learn to love something more modern? And I think I should just give a shout out. It's more like a listening list, really, than some. I can't admit to have listened to all of these albums, but Yolanda Brown is a British tenor sax player. She had an album out in 2012 called April Showers and Mayflowers. Oh, sorry, April Showers, Mayflowers. I think it's kind of more on the easy listening end of it. But so that's an A album. If we go to the B, I think I mentioned to you Sons of Kemet some time ago, Eric. Back to the Future. This band plays has a tenor sax player. He also doubles on clarinet, actually, and a trombonist, is it? And then they've got two drummers. It's kind of no, it's not a trombonist. I think he's a tuba player. Sons of Kemet. Back to the Future. Can't say all of the stuff relates to jazz as I understand it, but it is featured in a lot of jazz criticism articles and so forth. So yes, there is another B for you, and another B as a very young player called Rosie Frater Taylor, a guitarist. She's got an album out in 2021 called Bloom. Then we come to she's another British artist, by the way. Then we come to the United States, and there's a Korean, somebody of Korean origin named Ji-Ye Lee, and apparently she's won a lot of prizes for her compositions. Went to the Berklee School, and she's got an album called Daring Minds out in 2021, and that's a D. I couldn't find a C, but there probably will be, if we do our research.
What falls through the cracks of this, even when we speak about, I'm into politics and political issues, and certain generations fall through the cracks. There's the great pianists Mulgrew Miller and Kenny Kirkland, and we might do this whole thing and never make mention of them because they're that in between prior to the current contemporary people generation. Both have since come and gone, unfortunately. But these were very, very heavy, serious, weighty pianists and collaborators.
I can't pretend that my my sort of tape collection is going to draw in everyone, and probably it's our job to go out and find more people that should be in this ultimate collection that's out there. Perhaps it's in the cloud somewhere. Probably always is. It already is there. Only we've got to.
I think it is. And I think you're absolutely right. We should mention this and be inclusive of this desire often enough, because I mean, here we are of our generation, and our collection is inevitably, by definition, of things of the past.
Well, we'll need to maybe get a bit more input from people who listen or watch these videos in order to tell us more of what's going on, who's been missed out. Although I take the point, Eric, there are plenty of people that you can mention just off the top of your head, which is great. Well, if you do have anything to say, anyone viewing this video, please drop us a line. You can tweet us at Collection Build. That's all one word, at Collection Build. Or you can now send an email to Collection Build, again all one word, collectionbuild@gmail.com. So thank you very much for viewing this video, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Let us know if you did, or even if you didn't. And Eric, thanks very much for this very awesome show that we've just done here. It's been a good thing.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. I mean, it's wonderful to be on the show.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Next time we'll roll on to, well, actually, we'll roll on to the H's that we didn't cover because we were talking about Coltrane and Yusef Lateef for a long time. So we'll see you then. Thanks to Eric. Thank you again. This has been Rebuilding the Collection, and I'm Paul Palmer.